So as I set the context and then introduce our three guest speakers, let me just say quickly that number one, we're really glad that all of you have shown up today to be part of this with us. We have made promoting wellness in all its forms part of what we're trying to do on each of the campuses. And I want to thank our colleagues on the Surrey campus, Isabel, Rachel, and Steve, Alyssa, and Sarah from Burnaby campus in Health and Counselling, and my colleagues here, Kelsey, Flavio, and Claudia, for the work they do in promoting wellness in all its different forms across the campus. The reason we've taken this on is that we see our role, part of our leadership role on each of the campuses, is to promote healthy workplaces in every way you can think of that, physically, mentally, spiritually, where people feel they belong, they feel welcomed, they feel they're part of something, they have time to do their work well, and also have an opportunity to feel deeply appreciated in doing that. That's part of wellness, and it's part of why we think it's so important, especially today with all of the challenges that each of us have and will probably be mentioned by our speakers. So that's why we do this. We do it regularly, and we're so glad you've joined us for this session today. So let me now introduce our speakers. I'll introduce our three speakers, and the last one I'll mention is the first person to start. So I'll thank them again for them coming along and sharing their expertise and experience with us. It's so important that you do this, and we spent quite a bit of time planning and preparing with each of our speakers, and all of us are so grateful that you've taken the time to do this. So thank you in advance. So Tricia-Kay Williams, and Tricia, if you could just wave to the assembly so they know who you are. Tricia-Kay is with us, and I want to thank you, Tricia-Kay, for being here. Tricia-Kay is a counselor with families and with individuals, and she's worked at the Salvation Army. She did her clinical practicum at the Pacific Community Resource Society, and has also worked at the West Coast Family Center in the co-parenting family counseling role. So Tricia-Kay, thank you so much for coming along and sharing your expertise with us today. Secondly, this is the second introduction for Len, but Len's already been introduced. I'll do it again. Len, of course, is from the Cape Sea Nation and a member of the Coast Salish families of nations as well. Len is an educator, a consultant. He's presented at TEDx. He's a social activist, traditional knowledge keeper, and cultural practitioner, and soon to be a graduate of SFU. So good luck in your graduate studies, Len, as you continue. And finally, in our first speaker, and when I'm finished, I'll just ask Scott to begin. Someone who's no stranger to us either, who's come along every time we've asked Scott to come along and present at any one of our wellness sessions. He's very kindly taken time out from his busy practice and teaching to be with us. Dr. Scott Lear is a professor in the Faculty of Health Sciences here at SFU, and Scott is the inaugural Pfizer Heart and Stroke Chair at the Cardiovascular Prevention Research at St. Paul's Hospital. So Scott has worked on this campus, the Burnaby campus, and moves back and forth with St. Paul's. He's also very active in the public sphere in sharing his knowledge about health and all the various aspects of it. So Scott, thank you. Thank you, Tricia-Kay. Thank you, Len. And over to you, Scott, to get us started.
All right. Thank you very much, Laurie. And thanks so much for having me. I'm always happy to participate in these sessions because it's a good reminder for me as well. And so I think, all of us, we have busy schedules, but it's important for us to make sure that our self-care and our mental well-being is included in part of that. I am going to share my screen because I have a few slides to present. And I'm going to touch on tips for addressing sadness and anxiety and how things that we can do can improve how we feel. So the first thing is to recognize that mental health, it reflects how we feel, whether that's emotionally, socially, psychologically. And all of us have a mental health. It's a spectrum. It's not the opposite of mental illness, just like you can have diabetes and have physical health. Every one of us is on the spectrum of mental health. And there's two things I want to share in terms of this graph here. This is by LifeWorks. They do a monthly assessment of employed adults and put it into a mental health index. And it goes from April 2020 to September was the last time. The higher the peaks, the higher the index, the better the mental health and well-being of the participants surveyed. So as you can see, this has fluctuated, and it's probably not surprising that it has fluctuated given changes over time during the pandemic from high risk periods of time to lower risk, and then restrictions, lockdowns, and limitations on what we can do. What I want to get across is that mental health can change. It can change from day to day in any one person, and it can change throughout the day. We might feel differently in the morning than we do later on in the day or at lunchtime. So given that, how can we can actually change and influence how we feel? So here, these are some tips that I want to go through. One of the things that I've started to become more and more impressed upon and enthusiastic is promoting sleep. And sufficient quality sleep. And sleep and mental health are tied quite closely together with one another. And on the right-hand side here is this kind of unfortunate cyclical feedback of, we get lack of sleep, we feel tired, we might have difficulty coping with daily life, might lead to low self-esteem, feelings of worry and stress. And then we worry, and then we get lack of sleep. And I've had times definitely where I've had poor sleep, and after a few days started to get worried about having poor sleep, which actually makes my sleep worse. So on the converse though, you have a sufficient high quality sleep, and you wake up and you feel like you can take on the world, and you're in a much different mood, even though maybe the external situations you live in the context of your life hasn't changed. Now, before the pandemic, about a quarter to a third of people were probably don't get that 7 to 8 or 9 hours recommended of sleep per night. Now, interestingly enough, the pandemic changed sleeping, which probably isn't surprising to a lot of us. But in the beginning, when there was severe lockdowns, not much to do, we weren't going to work, people reported they were getting more sleep. And especially teenage children we're finding that they're getting more sleep. But as things have come on and this pandemic's been more chronic than acute, things like insomnia, rates of insomnia have gone up. Searches for how to sleep on Google and insomnia have increased. So what are some things that you can take control of, and call them sleep hygiene measures that can improve sleep and improve your mood and make you better able to handle things that come at you during the day. So a sleep routine is essential. A wind down time, consistent bedtime, consistent wake time. And one thing, like sometimes we can't really control when we go to sleep. We can control when we go to bed, but some days, we might fall asleep right away. Sometimes it might be hard, but we can always control when we wake up, and that's by using an alarm. And that's actually one way too, as part of your routine, is making sure getting a consistent wake up time. And I will touch on that in a moment. When you have that wind down time in this routine, it actually primes your body to know when it's bedtime and when it's time to relax and fall asleep. Because we've got these internal clocks, and we can make sure that the internal clock knows when it's time to sleep. Set up your environments for sleep. Comfortable bed, pillow. If you live near an intermittent noisy street, you might want to do some noise reduction, whether it's in your room or if it's comfortable, sleeping with earplugs. I sleep with earplugs in, not because of the outside noise, but because of the noise within the room that emanates from the person sleeping beside me, to ensure that that's a quiet environment. And it's actually not so much noise as much as a fluctuation of noise that might happen. So even if you live by a busy street, some people find that kind of white noise that after a while they're just immune to it. But if you're on a quiet street and then like a racing car goes by, that's enough to wake something up. The same thing, consider light reduction, how sensitive you might be to the light. As part of your sleep routine, look at limiting screen time before bed. And some people aren't affected by this, but I always am. If I watch a thriller show or intense show before going to bed, I actually have quite vivid dreams, and that can interrupt my sleep. So I have to be mindful of that. Also consider napping and alcohol. And napping can be helpful. And like a nap between 10, 20, up to 30 minutes can be invigorating for the day. But if you start to nap longer than that, you start to get into actually a deeper sleep. And then when you wake up, you become groggy. And if you have too long of a nap, it can actually affect how ready you are to go to sleep later that night. And in some cases, if you are tired, it still can be good to avoid that nap and let yourself get tired for the evening. Alcohol is one that, in all of these things, for me personally, I've learned the importance of. When I was in my early 20s, I could throw caution to the wind and I would still have a good night's sleep. But things like alcohol, we know, can wake people up, because after about 4 to 6 hours of having a drink, that's when your body starts to metabolize it. And what happens is it actually increases your metabolic rate, your heart rate goes up, and that can be enough to wake some people up. And the last one on sleep hygiene is avoiding social jet lag. And what that is changing your sleep and bed times, wake up times on the weekend, which is most common on the weekend. Staying up later, Friday, Saturday night, sleeping in. And that may be fun at the time and enjoyable. The challenge becomes then going to sleep early on a Sunday so you can get up on a Monday. And it can take, if you do have that kind of social jet lag, it can take a couple days, like a Monday, Tuesday, before you're able to reset. The other one I'm going to emphasize is regular activity and exercise. So people who are regularly active, they have lower chances of getting a mental illness, lower chances of depression, anxiety, dementia later in life. It's also recognized as a treatment for depression and exercise in a comparable manner to pharmacotherapy or medications. And I want to touch on that there's actually a biological mechanism, just like there can be some biological chemical imbalances for certain mental illnesses. Exercise is helpful because it also works on some of these chemical aspects within our brain. So endorphins, which are natural opioids, are natural pain relievers, and endocannabinoids are released with activity. Now, these are associated with increased feelings of happiness and reduced anxiety. And it even happens at low levels. And when I mean low levels of exercise, you don't have to go out and run a hard 5K or 10K. Even something as little as a 10-minute walk has been known to improve self-reported happiness in people who have undergone that. And that can last for a few hours later in the day. And sometimes also it depends on how you feel before, but even if you're really stressed and then you go and do some activity, you'll be less stressed. You might not necessarily be totally happy, but you'll generally feel better. And I always like the saying that I came across is nobody regretted going out to exercise after the fact. Some other quick tips I'll run down. The meditation and mindfulness. So Sarah took us through that, so no need to speak to that. For all of these things like the mindfulness, the making a sleep routine, exercise activity, you need to make time for it, make time for self-care. And it can be thought of as being ironic that you want to make time to relax, but schedule it in if it's a challenge for you. Put it into your calendar, make it a routine. Other things that can help is write down how you're feeling. You don't have to share it with anybody, but for some it can provide that release. And then you can read it back. And I found when I've written down my feelings that when I read it back, I'm like, oh, it sounds more manageable seeing it in text than swirling around in your head, bouncing around in your brain. And the last one is to be kind to yourself. It's okay if you're not okay. And while we may not want to stay in that state, moving forward and looking at ways that how we can make it better. And sometimes it doesn't mean that you're going to be extremely happy on any given day. Or you can do some of these things that will get you towards feeling better. Because if you start to worry about not being okay, then that can actually worsen how you feel. But also recognize that it's normal to not have good days. It's normal to, you know, to wake up and, you know, feel a bit glum. If, you know, these things persist for days and weeks, it might be good to seek professional help. And so I'll leave it at that. So thank you for your time. And I'll pass it over to Tricia-Kay, who will carry it forward.
Thank you, Scott. And I'm so glad that some of what I'm going to be talking about, you know, was already shared by Sarah and also by Scott. And, you know, I think it's going to be a great opportunity for, you know, some reinforcement, right? So self-care is so important, right, in what we do. I just wanted to sort of take the time to extend, you know, who I am. So my name is Tricia-Kay Williams, and I own a private practice called Metamorphose Counselling here in Coquitlam, BC. And I also want to indicate that I also provide Black counseling for Black students, specifically at Counseling and Health on the Burnaby campus. So if you are a Black student here, please do contact me if you are looking for professional help. Okay, so to continue with the presentation, I'm a busy woman, right? My days are long and I have 3 jobs. You heard me, 3 jobs. And this is, you know, the case for a lot of women out there, a lot of students, right? I like to work hard. I used to feel accomplished if, you know, my feet hurt, you know, my email inboxes were empty, and I was able to get extra tasks done that wasn't on my to-do list. I pushed myself. You know, I'm Jamaican, you know, so a part of my culture is, you know, education and hard work is celebrated, right? And I accomplished a lot by living up to that expectation. Before I got married, my husband, then fiance, told me, you know, that he knows I work hard and he, you know, he supports, you know, what I do, but he fears I would not carve out quality time to spend with him. Now, this was hard to hear, right? You know, it was in that moment I began thinking of ways to continue to achieve my goals while identifying ways that I can spend more time with the people that I love. So I started to research, right? How can I do this? How is this possible? It's difficult, right? You know, so then I found, right, that we can find ways to be present by being mindful. We can find ways to be, you know, silent and in solitude and find peace with ourselves. And we can also unplug and reflect in nature, right? And I started hearing words about moments, right? So this idea of capturing small moments in your day that can help you to do just that. All right, so self-care can be done in small moments. Just by taking 5 to 15 minutes out of your day can help you help put you in the right frame of mind that can help you carry on to the next day. So I'm going to be sharing 3 different ways that you can capture these moments. So the first one is moments of reflection. So if you take that 5 to 15 minutes of your day to do some introspection, thinking about your purpose, you know, thinking about your well-being, once you identify that thing, then you can put it into action. So these moments of reflection allow us to think about what truly matters to us and place that as a priority. It also helps to create steps, you know, that can help us to put what we need into action. So by prioritizing what we need, we can then make space for everything else. Now, to create your own moment of reflection, you can use the following questions. And I really encourage everyone, if you have a pen and paper or something like that, you can definitely reflect on these questions later. So the first question: what are the things that are a priority in my life? The things that I value, right? Second question: How can I prioritize them? And the third question, how can I make that a consistent practice? I really appreciate Sarah talking about consistency here. Okay, I'll repeat the questions. What are the things that are a priority in my life? The things that are valuable. The second thing, how can I prioritize them? And then the third question, how can I make that a consistent practice? Okay, the second moment of solitude. So this moment has to do with being okay with silence. Now, this one can be tricky, right? In a sense that I know finding time for quietness or being alone is a luxury, right? Especially for our moms that are in the audience, right? That have little kids. If you can carve out 5 to 15 minutes before everyone wakes up, you know, while your kids are napping, in between appointments, right? In between classes or at the end of the day, it could work wonders for your mental health. Now, the quietness I'm talking about has to do with quieting the mental space, slowing down the thoughts. So sometimes we do not realize just how crowded our minds are with to-dos, with worries, with fears, negativity. The majority of burnout is caused by stress and mental strain coupled with body fatigue. So the ask is that you create a practice of meditation, switching the focus from thoughts to breathing. So I will lead you into a very short meditation practice, right? That's something that you can do anywhere, right? So you're sitting comfortably in your seat, and maybe you have a cup of tea nearby or a lit candle. Focus on your breathing, right? Do controlled breaths in and out by counting to 4 slowly. Then notice the thoughts. They could be intrusive, ruminating, and then floating away, maybe in an air balloon. Then you might return to your breathing. Now think of a place or thing that brings you peace and only give space to that for a few minutes. Then return to focus on your regular breaths. Answer the following questions to create your own moment of peace. Do you have a quiet space that you can find solitude? I know that question might seem weird, but a lot of people don't. So can you find a quiet space where you can find solitude? Second question, what are the things that help you create an atmosphere of stillness? For me, it's a candle or some tea. So what is it for you, right? The last moment of stillness has to do with mindfulness, right? We're talking about this idea of being present and making sure that we're intentional with the actions that we're taking and not being judgmental, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about the 5 senses here. And I'm just going to lead you into a few questions and examples that you can use to tap into your senses that are going to help you to be grounded in the present. So what are visual things that calm you, right? So for me, it's a photo album of my family, or it's trees and foliage. So what are some visual things that can help you, right? What are tactile things that distract you? So a smooth stone, perhaps, or an amethyst crystal. These are things that can help to distract you from maybe your thoughts or things that are going on for you, right? What are sounds that are soothing to you? So water running by, like from a creek or a river, is something that I like, right? Or jazz music. So what are those sounds for you? What are smells that are pleasant and aromatic to you, right? Lavender or my husband's natural scent. You know, what is it for you, right? The last thing, what are tasty things that give you pleasure, right? So for me, it's chicken. It could be some soup, right? Some mango ice cream, right? So what are those things for you? Something tasty that gives you pleasure. In conclusion, Oprah Winfrey shared her philosophy of handling life's endless sources of stress. She said, the reason why you're always stressed is because you want this moment to be something that it is not. You just stop and you accept this moment for what it is. Just breathe right into that moment. The anxiety and the pressure away of wanting this moment to be something it is not. Just this moment, one moment at a time. It is a process. It is not just one thing. You don't wake up one morning and you suddenly have it all together. So the reminder here is that it's a continued practice. It's something that you're going to need to master over time. So be kind to yourself. Thank you, everyone. And I'm going to pass it on to Len.
Hi, Tricia. Thank you so much, Tricia-Kay, and thank you, Scott. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like, you know, I don't know about anybody else, but I'm like, can we just stay here all day and just like talk about caring for ourselves and caring for one another? And I'm like, can we just hang out and let's just make this a daily thing next time? That just really filled my cup, and I'm really appreciating the conversation so far. It's really filling my cup in a way that I never really was expecting. And I appreciate that there's a lot of, you know, interwoven aspects of, you know, caring for ourselves and caring for one another in such an important time. So thank you. I appreciate that. And I just want to start by, you know, expressing my intention for being here today and talking about wellness. My approach to really talking about wellness really is kind of coming from this place of, I think with an openness, open heart and open mind, and an invitation to tap into, you know, an Indigenous worldview. You know, my messaging for wellness really is coming from my intergenerational strengths as a Coast Salish person, as a Katzie First Nation knowledge keeper. And I say that because I think that our ancestors, our Coast Salish ancestors, you know, really did have this profound relationship to wellness with not just themselves, but their wellness with the spiritual world, their wellness with the land, and the wellness within the community, within our social aspect of ourselves, back to Natsamat and all my relations. And so within that, I think that there's an ancient wisdom, ancient practices that are a part of the lands and the territories in which we all live, work, and play. And so I kind of wanted to hold a little bit of space today just to introduce some ancient concepts that have been introduced and shared with me by elders and knowledge keepers in my life. And a lot of my own lived experience too, because in my experience, in accessing and putting your feet on the pathway to wellness, the journey started internally. It started with a conversation with myself. Number one, and I don't know if you struggle with this too, but the struggle of worthiness. Am I worthy to pause, to take the time to sleep in, to get these amount of hours of sleep with everything that we're up against? You know, we're driven by this, you know, addiction age of being so addicted to information that it's so hard to turn it off. And I struggle with this balance of, am I worthy? Have I paid for it? Have I earned this ability to unplug and then plug into myself? So part of my intentions for sharing what I've learned about my own wellness and in relationship to ancient concepts around Indigenous wellness, I would like to frame it within the 7 sacred teachings. What are the 7 sacred teachings? I've learned them to be these fundamental yet universal, widely spread beliefs around these 7 core areas on how we as human beings interact with ourselves and with the rest of the cosmos around us. So, and I'll just offer them really quick and in a hurry. And again, it's just an introduction to look at wellness through another lens. It's an invitation to look through an Indigenous worldview on how we look at and conceptualize that validation of accessing wellness for ourselves. And I know that this is probably sounding very familiar, but that's part of wellness too, is being reminded that it's okay, being reminded that it's okay to take care of ourselves. So the first principle or the first teaching, the ancient teaching, is the teaching of wisdom. And when I think about wisdom, I think it's different from knowledge. Wisdom comes from experience. And I think that our experience tells us, you know, if we tap into it and pause, that we can remember our resilience. You know, our bodies love us so much that they are healing all the time. You know, if you have a paper cut or a scrape in your skin, your body takes care of you and heals. You break a bone, the magic of the body is to heal it. And so we're always healing. And one of the teachings from our ancestors is that wellness is abound. It grows with such ease and comfort. If we're lacking in wellness, sometimes it's really just the internal journey that we need to make to find out where we're pinching it off a little bit. And quite often that's been my lived experience, is that if we're not feeling that well, that we are probably pinching it off a little bit. And so that's why I always say that wellness is like a journey within a lot of the time. Number two, the teaching of love. You know, sometimes we think, and that's why I always say it's not just about our self-care, it's also part of, you know, balancing that out with community care. So being of service to others fills your cup in a way that you can't buy at a spa or within a course or within a class that you sign up for, right? Being of service, we know, speaks to the soul. It speaks to the human spirituality, that we are social beings and that we feel really good when we help take care of other people. But it needs to be in balance, and that's hard for us, especially for those of us who are parents or care providers. We need to make sure that that is in balance with loving ourselves first so that we can be of service to others. So balancing that aspect of love. Bravery, remembering that it's okay to ask for help. I don't know if there's any Brene Brown fans out there, but you know, being in a vulnerable position is where the magic always happens, and asking for help puts you in a vulnerable situation. And my hunch is that we don't ask for help enough. Number four, respect. Respect for your mind, your body, spirit, and emotions. And I think that that's been brought up many times, is remembering when to pause and validate that it's okay to take care of our mind, to take care of our body, to take care of our spirits and emotions. What I do is I write down this into 4 tables, and I write down under body ways that I am committing myself to how I'm going to respect my body. Eating healthy, exercising, yoga, meditation, those kinds of things. Then I'll write down emotions, and I'll write down a list on the ideas that I have for taking care of my emotions. Then I'll constantly revisit it, and it becomes like this evergreen commitment to myself. Number 5, honesty. You know, you are not your thoughts. That's being honest with ourselves, is we are not our thoughts, that our thoughts are not a part of who we are. Our thoughts are kind of like this bubble that surfaces around our head. And if we are saying things to ourselves, right, like when we have that internal dialogue and we're saying things like, I'm not smart enough, I'm not rich enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not skinny enough, you know, we're internalizing that as our identity. And we can change that and work with it when we say, I'm having the thought that I don't have that much money right now. I'm having the thought that I'm not pretty enough or skinny enough or strong enough or fit enough. You know, it changes the way we're showing up in our thought processes. And that's just the respective honesty with ourselves. Number 6 is the teaching of humility. Humility is recognizing that, yes, we are, you know, egoistic human beings, but we need to balance it out with our human humility and recognizing that there is power greater than ourselves. And part of the hardest teaching that I struggle with all the time is the art of surrender, letting go, you know, to the universe, to the cosmos, to God, to whoever it is or whatever it is that you pray to. Is that sometimes we just need to exercise that humility by remembering, if we surrender it, you know, the universe can take care of it for us. And the last is the teaching of humility. You know, or not the teaching of humility, is the teaching of truth. And truth is something less of what we know, but more of what we feel. You know, so we need to honor the truth aspects of ourselves, and that our truth might not be the same truth as somebody else. So if you're in a conflict with somebody, speak your truth and put yourself in a place where you can receive somebody else's truth. I blow it all the time. It's practice, not perfection. It's a journey, not a destination. But if we can internalize just a proportion of that, that you can speak your truth, but you can receive other people's truths, will really help navigate how you interact with fellow human beings. That might be one of those areas that you're pinching off wellness. So that's just a snapshot, a bird's eye view of, you know, the 7 sacred teachings and how I have used them to incorporate wellness within my own lifestyle. So I just want to thank you, each and every one of you, for listening. And at this time, I would like to hand it back over to Steve. So over to you, Steve. Hi, Tsepka.
Wow, thank you, Len, Tricia-Kay, and Scott, for 3 amazing presentations. And I really felt strongly that they really connected to one another, your presentations. We do have now about 20 minutes or so to have a Q&A from our participants. And please put your questions in the chat. Laurie and I will kind of stick handle the Q&A portion. And I do see there is one question. Is there somewhere we can, oh, this is just a technical question, somewhere we can download Len's PowerPoint? It resonates well. Len, are you willing to share that with us, and we can share that with the group? Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. So that PowerPoint that I shared is like a very shortened version. It's like my 7-minute elevator pitch. But there is a greater in-depth PowerPoint slide deck on my website, lenpierreconsulting.com. I'll put it in the chat box. And it's under the it's under a wellness presentation slide deck. So it's available there for sure.
Okay, thank you. And I'll start it. Please, people, go ahead and put your questions in the chat. Laurie, I'll start with a question that I have, and maybe you might have a question, and we'll kind of wait for questions in the chat. One of the things all three of you spoke to in a certain way is to be kind to yourself. It's a journey, not an outcome. I personally struggle with that sometimes. Like I kind of really can be hard on myself that I have to try and master certain things around wellness. I'm just wondering if you have any more specific, and I ask all three of you to comment on this. Is there any specific tips to be kind to yourself as you're going through a journey to ongoing wellness? And maybe we'll just go in the reverse order. Maybe Len, you go first, and Tricia-Kay, then Scott.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is probably one of the biggest barriers to, our wellness. And I think it came up in all three of our conversations, is that, it's a process and it's a practice. It is not something that, we are very conditioned into, be an objective way of thinking that we're going to put wellness into this box. And that's what we're going to kind of commit to. But I think it's just recognizing that there's this fluidity and flexibility within our own wellness, and it will kind of ebb and flow. And the way I do it in terms of my strategy for getting around that is to constantly have a conversation with myself. That's my approach to it, is I need to, if I'm feeling it, and we know when we're feeling not well, if we're feeling stressed out, a sense of anxiety, sense of depression, feeling kind of low. And then when I'm feeling like I don't have a lot in my cup, I literally sit down with myself and have a conversation with myself and just say, I ask myself, what am I pinching off a little bit? And then kind of have conversation as if I was talking to my partner or talking to my child or talking to my friend. You got to lift yourself up the way you lift up others around you. That's what my strategy is. Thank you.
And I liked what you said about I'm having the thought. It's not, I don't have to own it as part of my identity. That was really good. Tricia-Kay, your thoughts on that?
No, I really like what Len said there, that idea of having that conversation with yourself. Yes, definitely. And I think that that's great when you have sort of that intuition and insight into how you're doing. But I think what I could add there is that sometimes people don't have that insight, or they don't know when, they're getting to that place of burnout or stress. And I think maybe what we could do is adapt some of what Sarah helped us with earlier with the check-in with our bodies, right? Because sometimes our bodies can help to tell us, right, when something stressful is happening. We clench maybe our fists, or, our heart races, or, you feel dryness in your throat, or, you doing that check-in helps you be able to be like, okay, what do I need now that's going to help me in this moment? And I think that could be helpful.
Thank you. Scott, any thoughts?
Yeah, definitely it sounds easier than it is. And when, even the word tips, that to me has some inference of something short and something simple. But it's not necessarily, and it's also something that requires practice and also, as Tricia-Kay mentioned, like help. Think of playing the piano, you could play for years, and if you have a break for 6 months, you can't expect to go sit down and play just as you did before. So practicing, like whether it's the mindfulness, being okay to yourself. And the other thing I thought of just quickly is conversations I've actually had with my teenage son about basketball, and how some games he'll play like 90%, close to 100% of his potential. The next week he's played maybe 50%. His skill level, his knowledge, none of that has changed. But his mental either approach or what happened in the day or whatever, how he felt, And
Hmm.
he has a response that's similar to a lot of us. Like, he'll spend the time learning how to shoot the basketball, but we have to also learn how to do the mental aspect. And just like, we can't go to the piano and just all of a sudden get it out of our head or shoot the basketball. We might need to actually get others to help us, like Tricia-Kay or Len, and provide some direction on that.
Thank you. Thank you, all three. Lori, I do have one more follow-up question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Are you okay with that?
Sure.
One of the other things I've learned from all three of you is you can't buy wellness. And I mean, I'm purposeful about this question, that a lot of times in our kind of Western society, people think they have to buy things, like they buy the gym membership, they buy, the fancy equipment and so on. The commodification of wellness. And I feel like all three of you have spoken to, it's not about that, or maybe it's partly about doing that, but like nature walks and connecting internal. And Scott, I saw something you wrote in response to a media request a couple of weeks ago, that you said, we can get wellness and exercise in just our daily activities of life. So I'm just wondering if you have any comments about, the link between wellness and, the things people buy to try and grab onto it. And maybe I'll start with Scott, and we'll go to Tricia-Kay, and then Len, you can finish.
Right. Well, my first thought that springs to mind is, the more marketing something has to it, the less you probably need it in terms of, purchasing it. There's a lot of things, some of those things people might enjoy, going to the gym, the social aspect.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But it's like you said, this commercialization of you can only get it from somebody else, and this, like, we're outsourcing our wellness. I believe, and Len and Tricia-Kay would probably know more, is that we have it all within ourselves, but we just may need some guidance.
Thanks, Scott. Tricia-Kay?
Yes, no, I really like that, Scott, that we have it within us. We just need some guidance. And yes, definitely you could get some satisfaction from purchasing something, right? And I think that initial reward that you get from that, consumerism practice of buying something, I think helps with the, going to buy something again. But I think that the digging deeper within to really find, what do I need, is going to really help in the long term, not just the short term. And I think the long term is the focus here. That's really going to help you in the crunch when, you really need something that's going to be, that's going to do the deep work for you. So I think digging a little deeper and finding out what you need, and maybe what you need is something that needs to be purchased, but at least doing that exploration first will help you to know exactly what to purchase.
Thank you. Len?
Yeah, I don't think I have very much to offer. I totally agree. I think that they're very much, the same, seeing this wellness as an external event, something to be bought. And I think the only thing that I might add is that we also think of, like, I think this is just the generation we grew up in with technology, is we need to honor and recognize that we live in an instant gratification, instant manifestation era too, where it's like, hey, we order Skip the Dishes, we order Amazon, and it's within our doorstep in a couple of days. And so when we buy things like a gym membership or a meditation class or a yoga class, and we're like, why am I not well yet? It's like, it's not forgetting that it's not external, and it's been said already by Tricia-Kay and Scott Linear. It's built within us, right? And that's why I always say it's that journey inwards, and just being with yourself and sitting with yourself. We're also in an era where we like to be distracted. We like to distract ourselves from being with ourselves by topping into Netflix and social media, and we want to distract ourselves, and sometimes being alone is really hard for a lot of us. Meditation can be really hard for us. Yoga can be really hard for us because we don't like being with our body. We don't like it because we haven't practice that inward journey yet of, being comfortable with the idea that we can be with ourselves. So I think that, really looking that wellness is already a part of you. You exercise it every single day, when you eat, when you walk, when you laugh, when you cry. That's what I mean when our ancestors were like really well versed in, knowing this understanding that wellness is everywhere, right? When you look at the forest floor, a bush doesn't struggle to come up. It just, naturally does, right? And we can do that too. We have the ability to do that if we just practice this awareness and flex this muscle of being accepting of where we're currently at, and always developing that relationship with ourselves, just like we do with other people. That's what I would add.
Thank you, Len. We got about 5 more minutes for questions. Kelsey in the chat, what I really loved what Scott said, I think it was Scott, but could be wrong, about feeling like you need to work hard enough to earn your relaxation time. Any tips on dealing with reducing that sense of guilt? I think all 3 of you in one way or another referred to that, but any thoughts on the guilt? And I'll just open up for the first person who wants to say something here.
Yeah, I guess I'll say something. Again, it's not easy, and again, this kind of ties on to what Len said at the end about the journey and some of the things, and it's not specific necessarily to this question, but it's this notion that we should be able to figure this out within a day or within a week or within a month, and recognizing that, I deal with it also in my world of when we're of health, in terms of people who want to change their body fat distribution or something like that. And, you can walk around the neighborhood and see signs, lose 30 pounds in 30 days. So there's all this assumption that it can happen fast. So I think that's the first thing, is realizing that it might take some time to deal with it. Recognizing that also that it's, normalizing, maybe not normalizing, but accepting your feelings. These are your feelings, and to move on from there. And the sense of feeling this, and I guess asking oneself, because I'm also kind of thinking this out for myself as well. There's plenty of times where I'll feel guilty, I'm not working enough. I can show you all my lists of task lists, and I get caught up in measuring what I can cross off as whether I'm productive for the day or not. But it's having that balance between thinking of what's valuable, what you have time to do, and then giving yourself a break when you can't do that.
Tricia-Kay or Len?
I think for me, and this is just, I'm gonna be very transparent. I think that, and this is, what I've struggled with is this idea of that we have somehow demonized or felt that it's a bad thing to be selfish. And I think that we grapple with this idea of that it's bad and it's wrong to be selfish. I have since gone in the other direction and learned, just by experience and balance, that we need to be selfish, and it's okay to be selfish. And you cannot be, we idolize and praise selflessness, but you cannot be just in this zone of selflessness, because again, you're just pouring everything out of your cup, and then all of a sudden you have nothing left to give. So I say selfishness comes before you get to that place of being of service to others, to being selfless, whether it's within your job or your studies or in your family. You need to be selfish first, because if you're not, then you have nothing left to kind of give. So I say that selfishness comes first. And I've kind of moved away from this internal dialogue that being selfish is bad.
Yeah, we talk about sort of, setting boundaries for ourselves. It can be really difficult, right? So just again, reinforcing what both Len and Scott said here, right? We have to recognize this respect that we have for ourselves, right? And identifying, like, if I can give service to another person, right, in at the expense of myself, right? I'm running on an empty battery, for example, or I'm not filled, right? I'm on empty. Then, in a sense, I'm not respecting myself. So if you think about it in that way, then you recognize that the guilt can then be shifted to care, right? The need for care.
Okay, we got time for one more question. I'm gonna ask you to do an elevator pitch kind of answer, very short, like 20 seconds or so. But this comes from a late question coming in from Nav Chima. So we're getting to the new year. If you were to suggest a wellness resolution, what would it be? Nav's always got these really kind of deep and thoughtful questions.
I'm not a big proponent on resolutions because I think that they can definitely be more short term and very much wanting to follow, this idea of a new year, needing to do something new. But I do think that if we are intentional about making a change or doing something different, to think out specific steps of how you're going to do that. So it's not just saying, oh, I want to lose 15 pounds. It's saying, I would like to create a lifestyle that's going to help me to lose 15 pounds by eating healthy, by doing this, by doing that. And by doing that, you're holding yourself accountable to the things that you indicated that you're going to do.
Thank you. Len or Scott?
I think just for me, it's, and this is something I probably commit to myself many times throughout the year is that reinvesting in that commitment with myself. And that's the hardest part to accessing any kind of wellness. You're never going to get to meditate or pause or get to that good place of sleep if you're not constantly developing this practice for checking in with yourself and being with yourself, right? That's slowing it down and validating yourself. We can create the resolutions and everything, but if we don't do the internal work of being okay with ourselves and saying that I am worthy of that, I think the other stuff will be, quite superficial. That we'll try, but I think it really starts from that inward of being okay with, you need to lean in with yourself, be with yourself, and take care of yourself the way you would take care of your children or your partner or your studies or your career moving forward.
Thanks. Scott, final word to you.
Yeah, great points. And I would think along those lines is maybe providing that structure for yourself. I'm a big proponent of putting it into routine. It's like, if you wait until you have time to do something, you'll never have the time. If you wait till you have money to buy something, you've got to make that commitment. So on my task list, I'm thinking, besides the work things, I also put down lunch to make sure I get a break. I also put down when I go for a walk and these things. And for me personally, I also get the enjoyment of doing it. And then I get the enjoyment of crossing it off my list as something that's done.
Well, thank you all three, Scott, Tricia-Kay, and Len, for an amazing panel presentation and discussion. We're so grateful to all three of you, and I know I've got lots more to think about based on the presentation. So thank you for that.